I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land on which we are gathered here today and to pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging. Bathurst Regional Art Gallery is delighted to be presenting the 2019 Archibald Prize. The Archie, as it's affectionately referred to, is one of the most popular, prestigious, oldest and at times controversial portrait prizes in Australia. It was established in 1921 through the bequest of J.F. Archibald, the founding editor of the Bulletin. Last year, in 2019, the prize was in its 98th year. The Archie is awarded to the best painting of a notable Australian. There are some terms and conditions, such as the painting must be done within the year that it's been submitted and that the artist must have direct contact with the sitter. Over the decades, many prominent artists have won the prize, including Brett Whiteley, William Dobell, Nora Hyson, Ben Quilty, Wendy Sharp, Tim Storia, Kevin Connor, William Robinson, Fiona Lowry, and Judy Kassab, just to name a few. Last year in 2019, there was over 900 entries. 51 artists were selected, and Tony Costas, who's right here next to me today, was awarded winner for his fabulous portrait of fellow artist Lindy Lee, and this is it here. Tony studied law. He then decided to focus on art, studying at Julian Ashton's and Desmond Orban art schools in Sydney. He decided to pursue his studies with postgraduate at City Art Institute, which is now known as UNSW Art and Design. In 1988, he was selected to participate in the Triangle Artist Workshop in New York. He has been a finalist and/or won numerous art prizes, including the Bosman Art Prize, the Dobell Drawing Prize, the Doug Moran National Portrait Prize, the Kilcore Newcastle Art Prize, the Sulman, the Wynne, and on 3 occasions he's also been a finalist on the Archie prior to winning this painting behind us. And in 2018, it was with his portrait of media personality and fashion designer Claudia Chan Shaw. In 2017, it was the portrait of Simon Chan, who's actually in the room here, so hi! Director of Art Atrium Gallery in Sydney, and it's also Tony's dealer. And his first time that he was hung in the Archie was with, in 2015 with portrait of fellow artist and good friend David Fairbairn. Upon receiving the Archibald Prize in 2009, Tony, you thanked your mother for advising you to follow your heart. So what inspired you to become an artist?
Well, thanks, Emma. It's a good question, and it was a turning point in my life because at that stage I had already started to sit for exams and I'd passed a few, but I was struggling with law because I was constantly thinking about painting and I had to make a decision. And I remember walking into the kitchen and my mother was standing at the kitchen sink washing, and I said to Mum, what do you think I should do? I'd had a lengthy conversation about art and law, and without turning she said to me, follow your heart. But I thought she said follow your art. So I thought, well, that was pretty simple. That's exactly what I do. So I was articled to a barrister, and I was working at the district court while I was doing law part-time. And I walked in on Monday morning and said, Brian, I'm giving up law. And he looked at me and he said, you're absolutely crazy. And I thought, well, he's probably right. But it's what I wanted to do. And I'd heard of an art school down at the Rocks, which is still there today, the Julian Ashton Art School. It's where Brett Whiteley studied, and lots of other people that I respected had been there. And so I gave up law and started doing a course at Julian Ashton's. But it was because of my mother's support and enthusiasm and encouragement that I was able to take that huge leap. And I'd heard stories that there's no money in art, so I had to address all those sorts of things. But it was a courageous thing of my mother to think, you know, I think you should do what your heart says. And despite all the peaks and the troughs, and mostly troughs, yeah. So I had to be prepared for that. But I think it's incredibly important to get that support from your family, and I was very fortunate to have that from my mother. And she was so that was me at 22 years of age. But I had her support till the very, very end. And she passed away in 2016. And right up until then, it was nothing but positive support and enthusiasm for the arts. And she wanted to know about the Archibald and kept up with all that and was terribly excited. So the first time I won a major award was in 2014, the Paddington Art Prize for landscape painting. And I went to the house and I said, "Mum, have you been praying?" She said, "You know, I pray every night of my life. That's what I do."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, your prayers are working because I've won the Paddington Art Prize." And she started to cry. And I said, "What are you crying for? I've won an art prize." And she turned to me and she said, "Because I've been waiting a long time." And she was 97 when she said that.
Wonderful.
She was almost 99 when she died. So, wonderful set of parents. My father passed away when I was a young teenager. But both parents were very supportive. I built my first frame with my father. So he was also encouraging. So very lucky to have that support.
So you started off at Julian Ashton's, but also Desiree Orban. Can you tell us a little bit about, because they're polar opposites in teaching. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at Julian Ashton's, I've been there almost 2 years, and I'd heard of a radical teacher, a Hungarian.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the philosophy of Julian Ashton?
Well, Julian Ashton is a very classical, traditional school where they teach you how to draw and mostly train your eye to see things. I did a lot of tonal studies, still lifes, figure drawing. Didn't do very much colour because that was the next phase and I'd left before I got to that phase, but I was getting rather restless and I wanted a bit more, and somebody had said that with my sort of experimental temperament I should think about going to see Desiree Orban, who was in the street directly behind Julian Ashton, also in the Rocks area. And he was 94 when I met him, and he said, "Where have you come from, Tony?" And I said, "Julian Ashton." And he said, "Right, well, just forget everything you've learned." That was his first sentence to me after I'd spent 2 years at Ashton's. Because I was horrified and I was 24, I didn't quite understand what he meant. He then said to me, "Have you heard about the concept of Zen?" And I said, "No, it's the first time I've heard the word." And he went on to explain that Zen stood for absolute freedom at the heart and the spirit level, and that if you're ever going to find out who Tony is, you need to drop all those lessons that you had at Julian Ashton to really discover and experiment and just to let go of all that sort of stuff. And letting go is a very, very difficult thing to do. It's not something you can do because somebody tells you should do it, but it happens over a long period, and you have to believe in it. So as an artist, you take a position, but that position is formulated over a very long time. And painting is the way I speak. It's the way I speak, paint. And so the style develops over a long period of time. But that was a radical transformation for me. And I didn't quite take on the ideas of Zen, but they appealed to me because they were liberating, and Julian Ashton was very traditional. And Zen is the complete antithesis of what Ashtons were teaching. So it stands for absolute freedom. The idea of ritual or anything, discipline, is thrown out the door. So it doesn't mean you can just fling paint around, but what it means is freedom with responsibility. Yeah. So the responsibility is you need to discover who you are as a painter. So that was appealing. Anyway, as years went on, and I thought more and more about it, and I dug a little bit deeper. And there's the result today. So what artists do is make their thoughts visible.
So now that you've actually mentioned the portrait of Lindy Lee, congratulations on winning. It's an absolute knockout. How do you go about finding a sitter? Like, what were the qualities? And with Lindy, you hadn't actually met her before.
No.
How did you make contact? How did it all come to fruition?
Yeah, it was a little unusual. With all the portraits I've painted up until now, I've actually known the sitter for some considerable length of time. I developed a very strong rapport with them. I have to feel comfortable with them, and I have to be excited about something. It's not just their physical appearance, but I have to understand the intellect, and I have to be attracted. And so in Lindy's case, I didn't have the opportunity to meet her, but I listened to an interview that she gave at the RKO New South Wales in 2011. And it's how she spoke about her own art practice, the deep focus that she had, her practice about her being a Zen Buddhist, and just how she approached the work. She spoke as a very wise person. She's a very funny person to be with. She's very relaxed. She's happy in her own skin, obviously. And just a very committed person, full of humility, and that appealed to me. And I thought humility, compassion, all the qualities that I admire in people, she would make a wonderful subject. She's also physically quite striking because on one side of her head she has this severe bob, and then on the other side she's got this lovely long black hair. So I thought I could do something with those physical characteristics. But it was the quality of a mind that really attracted me initially. And then I thought, yep. So I got in contact with Simon.
Yep.
Simon gave me a list of doctors.
Yep.
And I said, no, I don't want to paint those doctors. But I do want to paint Lindy Lee.
Yep.
Do you know anything about her? And is it possible to get in contact with her? And Simon said that she'd opened an exhibition at the gallery when it first opened. He had some initial contact with her. So you made the initial contact, and then
she was doing the RMA at the time. She sort of used to teach at Sydney University.
Yeah.
But she does come to Sydney every so often, so I just arranged for her to meet up with her.
So
Do you want to talk about the sitting?
yeah. So she flew down to Sydney, and I created a platform for her. I spoke to her about what position I thought I would like to paint her in, because meditation is such a large part of her own practice. I thought I'd love to paint you in your meditating position. So when Lindy walked into the studio in Sydney, I showed her a very primitive painting, a little watercolour that I had done just out of my own head. I'd seen photographs of Lindy meditating wearing a rakusu, so that's a rakusu, which is given to Zen Buddhists who have taken their precepts. And she was wearing this lovely black gown. I asked her to wear that because I'd seen images of it. And so I thought, this is what I'm going to do, and I'll drag some of the pink and the ochre colours into the background. Very simple, very primitive, and it was just something I flashed in front of her. She walked into the room and I said, what do you think? She was very polite. She said, you're the artist, you do what you like. And looking back on it now, I thought I would have been horrified if I'd seen that and thought, what's he going to do with it? But anyway, that was very primitive in early days. So then she sat for me with her eyes closed, meditating for, I think, about 3 hours. And I said to her, you can get up at any stage and take a break. But she said, no, I'm happy to sit. So I did a very large drawing of Lindy's head, which is that one there in compressed charcoal on paper. The drawing's about 100, I think it's about 1 metre by 80 centimetres.
Do you want to talk about how you work as well?
Yeah. So Lindy was sitting maybe a couple of metres away from me, and I had the sheet of paper on the table. I'll get to the table in a minute. But I did this drawing of her, collecting as much information as I could. And the reason that the drawing is large is so that I don't struggle to see the information when I go to do the painting. So Lindy's not in the room when I'm doing the painting. She's already left, and then I use the drawings. I pin these up on the wall and use those drawings and all the memory that I have of Lindy and all those sensations after she's left the room. So it's important for me to get a good drawing because that's all I have. I don't work from photographs. So after we had lunch, she then came back into the studio and I did the final drawing for the day for another 3 hours. And that's Lindy in her gown, sitting, meditating. She hardly said a word the whole time she was there, which was perfect, because it meant I could get on with the act of drawing. Unlike Simon, who I had to silence on yeah. So they were the two drawings. I draw and paint on an old hospital bed. And the reason I've chosen a hospital bed is because it has a small motor that sits under it. I can plug it straight into a 240 volt, and I can adjust the height of the bed according to the size canvas that I've got. So I'm not particularly interested in perspective, so I prefer to work on a flat surface in a compressed space. And then if it's a large canvas, I lower the bed. If it's a small drawing on paper, I can raise the height of that bed, and I do all the work on the surface.
And also, you don't use paintbrushes.
No, I
Can you
don't.
talk a bit about your process of transforming from those images there, from her being in there, capturing her essence, her aura, getting it onto paper through charcoal, and then how you transform that into this without it being on an easel, without paintbrushes, but you're looking down. So you can't really see, can you, what you do?
Not really. I mean, it's impossible to see the final result. But what I'm guided by are the rhythms I'm interested in. Matisse once said that he tried to do the painting in one go because he thought that way he could concentrate on the rhythm and the working of the painting rather than, constantly be judging the thing. So having it on the table means that I'm getting on with the act of painting and not worrying too much about the outcome. I can always, at the end of the day, put the painting up on the easel. If there's something I want to correct, I can do that. But while I'm painting, I'm being seduced by the patterns and the rhythms on the table.
And
I use my hand, I wear surgical gloves. I'm basically a gestural painter. So if I hold a paintbrush in my hand, I'm using this part of my body, the wrist. And the temptation is for me to include detail and information in the face. But if I'm using a hand, a finger, a very crude instrument like a thumb, so the marks you see here, that's actually my finger travelling down the gown. And these scalloped edges are all created with a small finger. If I need a large mark, I just simply turn to the side of the knuckle and apply the paint and manipulate the pen that way. So this is a very large mark compared to that one. So it might be the side of my thumb to get that large mark. And that's enough for me to suggest the gown. I mean, we know their hands and we know they're roughly in the right position. There's not a lot of information there, but we know that the thumbs are touching and the fingers are overlapping. And so that way I can get the painting down very quickly. So in that way I'm working, rather than going from paintbrush to brain back onto the surface, I bypass the brain and work directly with the contact on the surface. So I've always said my hand is 1 millisecond ahead of my brain. The brain eventually catches up, but I'm working at such a high speed that I don't have the luxury of time to think about information. And by doing that, I'm putting the feelings into the paint. I'm not worried about all the other stuff. The illusion will look after itself, but I've got to get down, the painting very quickly. So I've got spatulas that are various sizes, and I'll use those to apply large areas of very broad colour, and then I manipulate the paint as we go along. If you look at the bottom of the gown, you'll see hints of green, and that's something that happens later on. Because one way of repeating pattern and rhythm is to introduce colours throughout the entire picture. There's a small amount of green on the left-hand side here. There's also green inside the hands, and a couple of people have asked me whether she's holding something, and the answer is absolutely nothing. It's just a colour which is repeated, so the eye travels from the rakusa. If you look up at the nose and the eyes and underneath the lip, the bottom bit, you'll see a bit of green travelling all the way through the painting. So it's line and colour. And, in using line that way locks, the rhythm becomes structural, it gives structure to the painting, and rhythm is a very difficult thing to escape in a painting when you see it. You don't know why you keep looking at a painting, but it's the rhythm. It constantly travels around the entire painting. The rhythms in this are very quiet because she's meditating. A lot of my landscape work, they're much more rigorous because I might be painting, a picture of a tree, in which case, they're much more elaborate. But I pair the mark making and the colour right down to avoid any visual noise. Because this painting is about silence, and so colour would be distracting. There is colour in it, but it's very, I wouldn't say it's muted, but it's quiet. There isn't a bright red or a bright purple in it. That'd be too much. The rakusa that she was wearing, the green sack that she was wearing, was actually a khaki colour, but I thought that'd be too much. So I've amplified the colour of the green sack just to create some visual impact. And as I was painting Lindy's hair, I was actually running my fingers down the hair, almost like I was stroking her hair as I was painting it. So there is that texture and that sort of feeling of the plait running down the face. I think essentially if somebody said to me, why pick Lindy or why pick landscapes? I think you've got to fall in love with your subject. If you can do that, hopefully what's reflected is that affection that you have for the person or the tree or the rock, it doesn't matter what you're painting, back to the viewer. So I thought Lindy was very special, and I put everything I had into the painting.
It's a fabulous artwork. Are you able to tell us about some of your influences? Like you've mentioned, you really admire Ian Fairweather, the German expressionists in particular, Kirchner, there's also Nolan. You said the first artist that you admired when you were a teenager was Russell Drysdale.
Yeah.
Are you able to discuss that a little bit?
Well, I guess, growing up, you look at a lot of artists, and you're not quite sure why you like them. But the most important thing is that you gravitate to someone, and then it's years later that you understand why. In the case of Ian Fairweather, his work was very abstract, but what I didn't realise was that I was attracted to his lyrical line in the work. I kept looking at it and thinking, why do I like it? Also a tremendous amount of freedom in his work. He was also interested in Taoism and Zen Buddhism. So I didn't know that about Ian Fairweather, but I could see that in his work, it reflected those interests. In the case of Russell Drysdale, very early, I liked his palette, which is not dissimilar to the ochres and the reds that are in this painting. And he painted a lot of the towns that I visited as a young person, so I was interested to see the places that he went to. There was the German expressionists, of course, with their exaggerated colour palettes, distortion. I remember when Lindy was in the studio, I said, Lindy, sitting there, you look like a mountain. And she says, well, that's a great compliment you can pay someone meditating. And so I thought, to give the illusion that it is a mountain, I thought of extending, because she's actually quite short. She's only about 5 foot something. But I've exaggerated the top half of her torso to give this illusion of grandeur and mountain-like structure. The other thing I said to her was, and I'm getting off the track, but I'll get back to the influences. I said to her, have you ever levitated? And she said to me, no, I don't think it's actually possible. But what I can tell you is that after I have meditated, I feel like I'm floating. So I took that idea and thought, one, I'll keep her very close to the edge of the top to give the illusion that she's ascending, and also to keep the background colour quite similar so that you don't get the feeling of a very heavy base. In fact, that light area there was the last thing I did on the painting because I wanted to give the illusion that Lindy was floating in space. And the way you do that is you don't anchor her by creating a dark tone here in the corner. So the tonal colour of the background is similar throughout. So it gives the illusion that she is floating. So that both those ideas of exaggerating the torso, which is something that the German expressionists did, for the sake of expressing an idea, and having it close to the top meant that she was ascending. So I've spoken about the line and the limited palette. Sidney Nolan's got a very bold way of approaching work. I love his sense of composition. It's wacky and it's unpredictable. And with all of my work, even though the drawings are up on the wall, I don't actually draw the figure on the canvas. It appears from the chaos in front of me. So I'll apply large areas of colour and then find the form within the chaos, using the line to delineate the form. So all the folds that you see in the gown are things that I put in once the bulk of the paint is put on. Those little marks that you see on the rakusu are stitching marks. The rakusu is a sack which is made up of many, many pieces of fabric. So that's stitching all the way through the sack. I said to Lindy, who cuts your hair? And she said to me, there's a person up in Byron who does it. So why can't they get it right? And she said, I don't know. I said, I love it. It's at an angle of about 30 degrees, but I'll just increase it to 45 or whatever it is. And I'll exaggerate that angle because I think it's a lovely, lovely angle. It's something you can work with. So I use that in the painting. If you look very closely at the top, there's a mark just there in front of the eyebrow. The eyebrow was much longer, but I noticed that Lindy's eyebrows were quite short. So I just got the base of this finger and went like that and suddenly halved the length of that eyebrow. And you see that very distinctive mark. So they're the sort of corrections I can make once the painting's up on the easel, but 90% of the painting, or 95% of it was painted on the table horizontally. Yeah. The other big influence in my life are the mosaics in particular, most of the mosaics that I've seen, but in particular the mosaics in the Basilica of Santa Maria d'Assunta in an island called Torcello, just off Venice. And inside the chapel is a beautiful example of 11th century mosaics. And I'm drawn to them because these mosaics are made out of small chips of glass, but what they give off is quite extraordinary. They have emotional content, but also have a spirituality about them. But the most thrilling part about a mosaic is that they're made out of small chips of glass, which is quite crude, but they're able to emit this quality. So, I thought, well, why can't I use my hands and do the same thing without the chips of glass, but use my hands to create a work of art? I don't need brushes to do that. And the mosaics artists, which are mostly monks, they weren't trained artists, but they were able to. So my influences have come from a whole range of.
So in 1988, you were invited to go to New York. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the Greenberg that you came across in the whole 2-week intense period, please?
It was an intense period. I had an exhibition in 1987 at Barry Stearns. It was the last exhibition I had with him in the gallery. I'd sold 3/4 of the show and made $10,000, and I knew I couldn't live on $10,000. So I decided, I desperately wanted to build a studio, roughly the size of this room, and I thought to do that I need some money. So I got together with my young sister, and for 2 years I stopped painting and ran a business called French Twist. The twist was we were selling Mexican food, but that's a long story. Anyway, so we ran this business for 2 years, sold the business, and travelled around Australia, and as soon as I came back, I built this magnificent studio in Sydney, so I was happy that I did that. But while I was running the business, I got a phone call from a woman in Barrel called Roberta Howland, who ran the Barn Gallery, and she said, "Tony, I've got an American critic who's seen one of your works in the gallery." I had a small wash, I think it was, on paper, and he'd like to meet you. Because one of the reasons he's here is that he's nominating artists to go back to America to do a workshop. And I thought, well, that sounds exciting. But she said, he'll be here on Sunday. I said, I'm sorry, I can't come because I've got to go to a wedding on Sunday. And she said to me, well, Tony, unless it's your wedding, I think you should cancel and come to Barrel. So I said, oh, okay, it's pretty important, isn't it? So I went to Barrel, met Walter Darby Bannard, and he said, Tony, I'd like to put your name down for a workshop in New York. It's called Triangle, America, Canada, England. There were 23 countries involved and 2 artists from each country. So it was a pretty exciting time. And 2 weeks later, I got a letter to say I was accepted. So I left the business to my young sister and the staff and flew over to New York and did some paintings. And it was just thrilling because Clement Greenberg was there. He had put Jackson Pollock on the map and he was responsible for that whole expressionist movement in America. And I remember he looked down at one of my paintings, he made some, interesting comments about it. And it was just very thrilling to be surrounded by all this intelligence and all these people making art. Anthony Cara was there making sculptures. He invited me back to his place. I had lunch there. I stood up on top of a hill while he went around in a little golf buggy with the curator from the Metropolitan Museum in New York, selecting works. It was just all very heady and very, very exciting. And so that was just one of the things that can happen if you expect nothing.
Did it change your direction, or did it change, or reinforce your confidence and belief in that you'd made the right decision to pursue a painting career?
Yeah, it didn't change my course or direction, but it reinforced my belief in what I was doing, absolutely. And something like the Archibald does that, Has it changed you? No, but it's a great affirmation and it's a great thrill.
Well, that's going to be my next question.
Oh, so
No, that's great, because I was going to say, over the years, you've actually entered quite a few awards, you've won quite a few, and so I was wondering, what for you is the role of an art prize in the artist's perspective? Like, do you think they're important? If so, why? What's your approach to it? And do you think that,
I think art prizes are very important because, artists do it tough. We're very lucky in this country because there are many art prizes. I think there's something like about 1 a week or 2 a week, I forget what it is, but there's a lot of them. Maybe it's more than that. But it's important not to be defined by an art prize. They play an important role. It's a great boost for many artists. It means that they can continue doing what they're doing, because what an art prize does is say, well, we think that what you're doing is okay. Keep doing it. So it just propels you on to the next phase. One painting is another stepping stone into the other phase of your life. And an art prize just helps you to, it's confirmation, I think. Because we all go around with ideas in our own heads, but then other people look at them and think, we like your ideas and what you're doing, and here's some money, which is terrific, because the money gives you the freedom to go and experiment. And most artists don't have that luxury of time. You're on a treadmill working or painting, but an art prize gives you that luxury, and you buy yourself some time to go and experiment.
And so what are you doing now that you've won the Archibald?
I'm talking to you.
I know, but what have you got lined up? Like, have you got, have you been, I know that you're doing the shows on tour, so you've been going to different venues and that, but have you pursuing landscape? Have you got a show lined up?
Yep, I've got a show lined up with Simon.
Fantastic. When does it open?
In May next year, is that right? Yeah. And Sydney Contemporary, which has been cancelled because of the coronavirus. I think each artist has got one painting online, so we're doing a little bit of that. But I've started a new body of work based on waterfalls from the Royal National Park, a little place called Wattamolla. And I stood there about a month ago doing some drawings on site, and it's those drawings that I take back to the studio and create new work from. So I've just finished the works on paper. I've done bean drawings and the watercolours, and I'm about to launch into the main event, the big oils.
Before I open it up to questions, I was going to say, what advice would you give to a budding artist or an emerging artist? What takeaway would you?
Do the painting that only you can do with conviction and determination, and try not to be discouraged by the critics, because there's plenty of them, yeah, just hang in there. I mean, if you love painting, and you should only be painting if you love it. That's the only reason why you should paint. But if you love it, you're 3/4 of the way there, and you just got to hang in there. It's called brush mileage. I think that's a famous quote from Kevin Connor.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, brush mileage. He said, Tony, just get in there and keep painting. And
Is he one of your mentors?
He is, yeah. Kevin, I had Kevin for drawing at Sydney Art Institute. I painted Kevin for the Archibald. It didn't get in, but I think one of his drawings might have been selected for something else. But yeah, having those people say to you that, you know, what you're doing is okay, keep doing it. Yeah. It can be a very lonely existence. You know, artists work in studios very quietly, week after week, year after year, and then the chance to expose your work to the public is terrific. You know, the Archibald is an incredible platform, and it provides all that, and that's what every artist wants. So certainly, I've been doing a lot more talking than painting lately. But that's what I've done.
No, that's wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Does anyone here have any questions they'd like to ask Tony? Yes?
It's Ben Quilty is a wonderful artist. I wonder if you'd be kind enough to say why you like Ben Quilty.
Why I like Ben Quilty? Well, I think he's a dynamic painter. He also uses his hand and makes direct contact with the canvas. He's a very exciting composer and fearless. And his work has a lot of grunt, and I respond to paintings that have got teeth as opposed to dentures. So he's got plenty of that, and I like him for that reason, I think. That's all I can say, I think. Yeah, they're very meaty, but they're convincing. I mean, when I look at a Ben Quilty, they're convincing paintings. There's a lot of belief behind it. They're also incredibly compassionate. He takes on lots of causes, and they're very deeply felt. And those feelings come through his work, I think, in all the things that he paints. There's a lot of emotion in there, and I like to see that in other people's work. I can admire other styles, but I'm drawn to some painters more than others. I think that's, to answer your question, I think that's probably the reason why there is a deep feeling in his work.
Has Lindy Lee seen your painting in the flesh?
She has, yeah.
And what was her, did she call you up and say, I love it, you know, or what was her immediate reaction to it?
Well, when I got the phone call in the morning.
Yep. Is this Michael Brown telling you that you won the Archie?
Well, in two parts.
Okay.
So I got the phone call from Michael Brown on Friday the 10th last year. I was sitting at home having a coffee with my wife, Jeanette, and Michael Brown said, "Is that you, Tony?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "This is Michael Brown ringing from the Arco, New South Wales," and then the phone cut out. So I said to Jeanette, "Look, I think I know why he's rung. The painting's fallen off the wall. They've damaged it, and they're ringing me to say, come in and maybe, I don't know, patch it up. I didn't know what to think." Anyway, Jeanette said to me, "Why don't you go outside? You might get better reception." So I went outside, waited a few minutes, and then Michael said, "Tony, it is Michael Brown. You're not dreaming." And he said, "I'm ringing to tell you you've won the Archibald Prize." And I went quiet. He said, "Tony, you still there?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm on the floor." And I said, "Jeanette's resuscitating me." So he said, "You've got 2 hours to come in, come around the back. We don't want anyone to see you." And he said, "No pressure. You've got to be here in a couple of hours and the press will be here." And at 12, so at 9 o'clock I was having coffee. At 12 o'clock I was at the art gallery receiving the award, and in total shock. I was completely astonished. I've always said, if you expect nothing, you already have everything. And there's a lovely quote by the Dutch painter, abstract painter, Bram van Velde, who says, I live in a state of perpetual astonishment. I was certainly astonished, but it was a wonderful, wonderful thrill to get the call. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Does anyone have any other? Yeah.
Look, I do have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Robert Hughes, fabulous critic. I know that you admire him. Would you like to say why it's so important as a critic and how he sets a pretty good standard?
Ooh. I might have to get back to you on that. Leave me your phone number and I'll ring you. I don't know, that's a big one. Yeah, that's a biggie. No more than 2 questions per person. He's had his go.
Do you have a question?
Yes, I think you said there were 250 entries, something like
There
that.
was over 900.
Sorry.
There was over 900 entry. 51
Okay.
was selected.
I assume you have children. Would you advise your children you can make a living out of painting?
Well, to answer your question, your first part, I don't have any children.
Oh, right.
But the second part is, I wouldn't be terrified of going into the arts because you can't make money, because there are other ways of making money. Most artists that I know teach. Other people drive taxis or work in bars. If you truly love what you're doing, it doesn't really matter how you're making money. You'll find a way of doing it.
What I'm getting at
Yeah.
is, you know, we all have to live.
Yes.
To earn some money.
Yes.
So you can be devoted to your art,
Yes.
but you most probably have to have another income.
Absolutely.
To be able to be devoted. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I would say. If you want to paint, that's terrific, but go and find something. Lindy Lee did cleaning for a while, house cleaning, I think she said, or something like that. But it's not unusual for artists to go off and do other things. It's part of the journey. And it's unrealistic to think there are a handful of exceptions in this country of people who can make a living out of painting. And that's, good luck to them. But for most of us, we can't. And we have to find other ways of doing it. But that's not a big problem, because if that's what you want to do, you want to paint, the reality is it's going to be a tough road. I think Brett Whiteley described it as difficult pleasure. And he's on the money there with that summary. It is difficult. But you ask any artist and they wouldn't have it any other way. It is difficult and they recognise that. You go into the art world with your eyes wide open. But, when your work's hanging on a wall, it's a great thrill, and that's why we all do it.
Do you have any other questions? No? Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say or reflect upon?
We've covered everything, haven't we? Yeah. Thank you all for coming out and risking your lives.
Thank you very